Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, Text 66. We have been hearing Nārada Muni instructing King Prācīnabarhi. Mana eva manusyasya purva rupani shamsati bhavishyatascha bhadram te tathaiva na bhavishyata. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O King, all good fortune unto you. The mind is the cause of the living entities attaining a certain type of body in accordance with its association with material nature. According to one's mental composition, one can understand what the living entity was in his past life, as well as what kind of body he will have in the future. Thus, the mind indicates the past and future bodies. Did we read this one? No, we didn't read this, right? So we have been hearing that Prācīnabarhi was asking that how can we understand that because of karma of past body, one is suffering or enjoying in this present body, and how is the karma carried forward? So Nārada Muni has been telling him it's through the subtle body. You know, that the body, gross body changes, but the subtle body remains the same. Subtle body, which comprises of the mind, intelligence, false ego, that takes the soul to another gross body. And the mind is the seat of all the desire, where all these desires are stored. All the past experiences are stored, all the desires are stored. And so how with our mind, we are creating our future bodies. So we have been hearing that. Reading from the purport, the mind is the index of information about one's past and future lives. If a man is a devotee of the Lord, he cultivated devotional service in his previous life. Similarly, if one's mind is criminal, he was criminal in his last life. In the same way, according to the mind, we can understand what will happen in a future life. So all the samskars are stored in the mind. And we heard yesterday also that what the functions of the mind is thinking, feeling, and willing. And the situation of the mind is communicated through our body and the senses. And that's why it said, oh, the face is the mirror of the mind. You know, by the face we can come to know if the mind is disturbed, or what the mind is thinking is expressed through our body, through the activity. So here, Prabhupada is explaining, according to the mind, we can understand what will happen in a future life. So our consciousness, that's why it's so important for us to purify our consciousness. In Bhagavad Gita 4.18, it is said, Urdhvam gachanti sattvastha madhye tishthanti rajasa jaganya guna ritistha addo gachanti tamasa. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. If a person is in the mode of goodness, his mental activities will promote him to a higher planetary system. Similarly, if he has a low mentality, his future life will be most abominable. So we can see how our consciousness, how by our desires, we are creating our future body. By our thoughts, we are creating our future body. The lives of the living entity in both the past and the future are indicated by the mental condition. Nārada Muni is herein offering the king blessings of all good fortune. so that the king will not desire anything or make plans for sense gratification. The king was engaged in fruitive ritualistic ceremonies because he hoped to get a better life in the future. So King Prācīnabarhi, he was doing so many sacrifices, killing animals. Why? Because he wanted to go to the heavenly planets. He thought that this is the goal. We heard also when Narad Muni is giving him transcendental knowledge, he's like, hey, none of these people who came to help me do the sacrifices told me about the spiritual world, about the spiritual identity. They all just encouraged me to keep doing these sacrifices. So with that, we can know that many may be learned in the Vedas, but may not know the essence of the Vedas, which is for us to revive our relationship with God. So Narad Muni desired him to give up all mental concoctions. As explained before, all bodies in heavenly planets and hellish planets arise from mental concoctions, and the sufferings and enjoyments of material life are simply on the mental platform. So how by our mind we are having these desires, and with these desires within our mind, we are creating a body for us, a future body, which may be of a demigod or which may be of an animal. All depends on our thoughts, our consciousness. So that's why it said they're simply on the mental platform. They take place on the chariot of the mind, Manoratha. It is therefore said, Yasyasti Bhagavati Akanchana Sarvergunestatra Samasate Sura Para Abhaktasya Kuto Mahadguna Manorathena Satidhavato Bahi. One who has unflinching devotion for the personality of Godhead has all the good qualities of the demigods, but one who is not a devotee of the Lord has only material qualifications that are of little value. This is because he is hovering on the mental plane and is certain to be attracted by the glaring material energy. Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 18, Text 12. So the devotee, the pure devotee, he has all good qualities because his consciousness is already pure. And then one who's not a pure devotee, of course, there are material desires. And so we are acting on the mind. Oh, I will do this, I will be happy, I will do that, I will be happy. The mind is making us do all these different things. So we are attracted by the material world. So unless one becomes a devotee of the Lord or becomes fully Krishna conscious, he will certainly hover on the mental platform and be promoted and degraded in different types of bodies. All qualities that are considered good, according to the material estimation, actually have no value because these so-called good qualities will not save a person from the cycle of birth and death. So it's not sufficient enough to be on the platform of goodness. One has to come to the transcendental platform, understanding I'm spirit, soul, part and parcel of Krishna, so I need to engage in devotional service. Because that is what can get us out of the material world. Qualities in the mode of goodness are very good, they're very desirable, but they cannot take us out from this cycle of birth and death. The conclusion is that one should be without mental desire. Without mental desire. Anyabilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam. One should be fully free from material desires, philosophical speculation, fruitive activity. So anyabilashita shunyam. We have so many materials. We may have material desires. We may have desire for mental speculation. We may desire mysticism. But pure devotion and service means being freed from all these desires. And the only desire is to please Krishna favorably, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. The best course for a human being is to favorably accept the transcendental devotional service of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of human life. So, devotional service of the Lord begins by hearing from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Highest perfection of human life is to revive our love for Krishna. Adrishtam ashrutam chatra kvachin manasi drishyate yatha tathanu mantavyam desha kala kriyashrayam. Sometimes in a dream, we see something never experienced or heard of in this life. But all these incidents have been experienced at different times, in different places, and in different conditions. In the previous verse, it was explained that in dreams, we see that which was experienced during the day. But why is it that we sometimes in our dreams see what we have never heard of or seen at any time during this life? Here it is stated that even though such events may not be experienced in this life, they were experienced in previous lives. So we were hearing yesterday that how, we sometimes experience some kind of dream which we have never experienced in this life. But it's coming from the previous life because all our experiences are stored in the mind. All these samskars are stored in the mind. It's like a constant video recording being happening in our mind. According to time and circumstance, they combine so that in dreams we see something wonderful that we have never experienced. For instance, we may see an ocean on the peak of a mountain, or we may say that the ocean has dried up. These are simply combinations of different experiences in time and space. Sometimes we may see a golden mountain, and this is due to our having experienced gold and mountain separately. In the dream, under illusion, we combine these separate factors. So what we are trying to understand is whatever we are dreaming also, we have experienced those things. Of course, it may be like, okay, we've never seen a golden mountain, but we would have seen gold and a mountain. That's why we have seen a golden mountain. So we have seen certain things, we have experienced certain things. That's why we are able to dream of them. And they may be coming from the past lives, not necessarily it's in this life. So, in the dream under illusion, we combine these separate factors. In this way, we are able to see golden mountains or stars during the day. The conclusion is that these are all mental concoctions. Although they have actually been experienced in different circumstances, they have simply combined together in a dream. This fact is further explained in the following verse. So how our mind is just combining our different experiences, and that's what we are seeing. Sarve kramanurodhena
सर्वे क्रमानुरोधेन
manasa indriya gochara
मनस इन्द्रियगोचरः
hayanti bahusho yanti
आयान्ति बहुशो यान्ति
sarve samanaso jana.
सर्वे समनसो जनः.
The mind of the living entity continues to exist in various gross bodies, and according to one's desires for sense gratification, the mind records different thoughts. In the mind, these appear together in different combinations. Just give me a moment, please. The mind of the living entity continues to exist in various gross bodies, and according to one's desires for sense gratification, the mind records different thoughts. In the mind, these appear together in different combinations. Therefore, These images sometimes appear as things never seen or heard before. The activities of the living entity in the body of a dog may be experienced in the mind of a different body. Therefore, those activities appear never to have been heard or seen, because we don't know what past bodies we've had. We don't know what past experiences we have, but it's all stored in our mind. So, our experience in a different body, we can experience in present body. The mind continues although the body changes. So, how this can happen is because the mind never changes. The mind, intelligence, false ego, that does not change. The subtle body doesn't change. We are just keeping on changing the gross body. And so because the mind is the same and all the experiences are stored in the mind, the desires are stored in the mind. That's why we can remember these past experiences. Although it's like distorted, it's like in a dream or an illusion. So even in this lifespan, we can sometimes experience dreams of our childhood. Although such incidents now appear strange, it is to be understood that they are recorded in the mind. Because of this, they become visible in dreams. The transmigration of the soul is caused by the subtle body, which is the storehouse of all kinds of material desires. So at the time of death, the soul is carried away from this gross body that we are in. It's pulled out of this gross body. The subtle body goes with the soul. The soul and subtle body then enter another gross body. So unless one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, material desires will come and go. That is the nature of the mind, thinking, feeling, and willing. As long as the mind is not engaged in meditation on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, the mind will desire so many material enjoyments. So it's the nature, the function of the mind. It's the nature of the mind, thinking, feeling, willing. We can't stop the mind. So the mind is going to have some thoughts. It will have. If the mind is thinking of Krishna, then that is good for us. The mind is the best friend. But if we are not able to do that, the mind will desire material enjoyment. Because the mind is the seat of all the desires. That's where the desires are being stored. And it will have so many, let me enjoy in this way, let me enjoy in this way. Sensual images are recorded in the mind in chronological order, and they become manifest one after another. Therefore, the living entity has to accept one body after another. The mind plans material enjoyment, and the gross body serves as the instrument to realize such desires and plans. The mind is on the platform onto which all desires come and go. So the mind, it says, okay, let me do this and I will be happy. I'm gonna plan, I'll plan this way and I'll be really happy. And this plan is carried out by the material body. It's the instrument. Of course, everything is happening under the will of Krishna, will of Paramatma. The Paramatma is allowing the fulfillment of our desires and plans. And how? By this material body, this gross body that we have. Srila Narottam Das Thakur therefore sings, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Te Kariya Akya Arna Kariha Mane Asha. Narottam Das Thakur advises everyone to stick to the principle of carrying out the orders of the spiritual master. One should not desire anything else. If the regulative principles ordered by the spiritual master are followed rigidly, the mind will gradually be trained to desire nothing but the service of Krishna. Such training is the perfection of life. So we need to change our consciousness. The mind, we are always seeking material desires. And how we can train it? Narottam Das Thakur is saying, follow the orders of the spiritual master. If one just makes up that, okay, I have to follow the instructions of the pure devotee, then the mind will get trained. And gradually, the mind will seek the service of Krishna. And when the mind is seeking the service of Krishna, this is the perfection. Such training is the perfection of life. So following in the orders of the pure devotee, of the spiritual master. So to change, we can see then how the material mind is being changed to the spiritual mind. How? By following the orders of the spiritual master. The mind is otherwise seeking only material desires. Now we are hearing we have to change it to desire to please Krishna. And how can this change happen? We are not able to. So, following the orders of the spiritual master, following the orders of the pure devotee, then that is the training of the mind. And gradually, the mind gets trained. Satvaika nishthe manasi.
Sattve ekanishte manasi.
Bhagavad Parshvan Vartini.
Bhagavad Parshvarvardhini.
Tamaschandramasi Vedam.
Namaschandramasi Vedam.
Uparaja Vabhasate.
Uparajyavabhasate.
Krishna consciousness means constantly associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in such a mental state that the devotee can observe the cosmic manifestation exactly as the Supreme Personality of Godhead does. Such observation is not always possible, but it becomes manifest exactly like the dark planet known as Rahu, which is observed in the presence of the full moon. It has been explained in the previous verse that all desires on the mental platform become visible one after another. Sometimes, however, by the supreme will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the whole stockpile can be visible all at one time. So the desires again, we are being repeated, that is on the mental platform. It's all the mind which is making us think. And then they become visible one after another. But sometimes Krishna can make us see that, oh, these are all what your material desires are. In Brahma Samhita 554, it is said, Karmani nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhaja. When a person is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, his stockpile of material desires is minimized. So Lord Brahma, he is saying that the pure devotee, what his consciousness is, how can I please Krishna? So when a person's consciousness is, how can I please Krishna? Automatically the material desires are not there, or they are reduced to a minimum. Indeed, the desires no longer fructify in the form of gross bodies. Instead, the stockpile of desires become visible on the mental platform by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what I understand is that the desire then the devotee then understands that these desires are just superficial. It's just an activity of the mind. And how does it happen? By the grace of Krishna. Krishna gives this knowledge to the devotee. In this connection, the darkness occurring before the full moon, the lunar eclipse, can be explained as being another planet known as Rahu. According to Vedic astronomy, the Rahu planet, which is not visible, is accepted. Sometimes the Rahu planet is visible in the presence of full moonlight. It then appears that this Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. The failure of modern moon excursionists may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Apart from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment, and he has to transmigrate from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. So Prabhupada is explaining to us that Rahu is a planet in Vedic science. Rahu is accepted as an invisible planet, and that sometimes it's visible on certain nights of the moon. Here it's at full moonlight. And then it is said that these lunar eclipses happen because of this Rahu planet. This is the Vedic science. And Prabhupada is pointing out also that, some countries claiming to be going to the moon, maybe they are going to the Rahu planet. So, apart from this discussion, the point is that the living entity has immense, unlimited desires for material enjoyment. So we have so many desires to enjoy in various ways in this material world. And all these desires are what is creating our future body. And so we will keep on taking so many different gross bodies based on our desires to enjoy, till there will be a time where we'll have none of these material desires. Until that time, we have to keep on taking up different material bodies. Till the time we have material desires, then comes a point that there's no more desire. One desires to go back home, back to Godhead, because that's, after all, our original place. Each of us has this love for Krishna. Some point or the other, it will fructify. No living entity is free from the cycle of birth and death unless he takes to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, in this verse, it is clearly stated, Satveka Nishthe, that when one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, in one stroke, he is freed of past and future mental desires. So when one surrenders completely to Krishna, one is fully surrendered to Krishna, then all these material desires are burnt out. No more. So then no more taking any more material body. Then by the grace of the Supreme Lord, everything becomes simultaneously manifest within the mind. In this regard, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur cites the example of Mother Yashoda's seeing the whole cosmic manifestation within the mouth of Lord Krishna. By the grace of Lord Krishna, Mother Yashoda saw all the universes and planets within the mouth of Krishna. Similarly, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, a Krishna conscious person can see all his dormant desires at one time and finish all his future transmigrations. This facility is specially given to the devotee to make his path clear for returning home back to Godhead. So Krishna gives this kind of understanding to the devotee. When Krishna is seeing that this devotee is so sincere, then Krishna gives him this facility by which he can see all the desires that he still has in his heart, so that he can understand, oh, this is just material desires, and oh, okay, let me just let go of them. And so that he can, in the next life, after giving up this body, can go back home, back to Godhead. So because then the devotee can understand, oh, these desires are anyway just some material desires, and finish all his future transmigrations. Said. Why we see things not experienced in this life is explained herein. That which we see is the future expression of a gross body, or is already stocked in our mental stockpile. Because a Krishna conscious person does not have to accept a future gross body, his recorded desires are fulfilled in a dream. We therefore sometimes find things in a dream never experienced in our present life. So Prabhupada is explaining that for the devotee who is supposed to now go back home, back to God, and he no more has to take any material bodies anymore, because he does not have any more material desires. His desires to please Krishna. But he may have few desires that are left. And those desires will be fulfilled in a dream. So that he does not need to take a gross body, And after he gives up this body, he can go back home, back to Godhead. So we can see how Krishna is making so many arrangements, for everyone to go back home, back to Godhead. Naham mameti bhavoyam.
Naham mameti bhavoyam.
Purushe vyavadhiyate.
Purushe vyavadiyate.
Yavad buddhi manokshartha.
Yavad buddhi manokshartha.
Guna vyuho hi anadiman.
Guna vyuho yanadiman.
As long as there exists a subtle material body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, sense objects, and the reactions of the material qualities, the consciousness of false identifications, and its relative objective, the gross body, exists as well. The desires in the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego cannot be fulfilled without a gross body composed of the material elements earth, water, air, fire, and ether. So we understand there are two bodies that we have. We have the gross body, which is made of earth, water, fire, air, ether. And we have the subtle body, which is mind, intelligence, and false ego. And the desires are there in this subtle body. To fulfill the desires of the subtle body, we need a gross body. When the gross material body is not manifest, the living entity cannot factually act in the modes of material nature. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the subtle activities of the mind and intelligence continue due to the sufferings and enjoyments of the living entity's subtle body. The consciousness of material identification, such as I and mine, still continues because such consciousness has been extant from time immemorial. However, when one transfers to the spiritual world by virtue of understanding Krishna consciousness, the actions and reactions of both the gross and subtle bodies no longer bother the spirit soul. So liberation means not only giving up this gross body, but also being free of the subtle body. So one may not have a gross body, but because the subtle body is there, still this material consciousness will continue that, oh, this is me, this is mine. Oh, well, this is me. Of course, spiritual consciousness also we have that. But material, that, oh, we are thinking we are this product of this material world. We have the consciousness to the desire to enjoy the material world. Those desires are all stored in the subtle body. But one who's taken up Krishna consciousness, he's become Krishna conscious. Then at the time when he gives up his gross body, he also gives up this material subtle body. And he goes to the spiritual world as the pure spirit soul. In the spiritual world, we don't have this subtle body, gross body. We have spiritual body in the spiritual world. We have spiritual intelligence, spiritual mind, spiritual ego. The spirit soul understanding. I am part and parcel of Krishna. That is real ego. I am spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. So that is understanding the true self. Sukti murchopa tapeshu.
Supti murchopatapeshu.
Anayana vighatataha.
Pranayana vighatataha.
Nehateham iti jnanam.
नेहतेऽहम् इति ज्ञानम्
Mrityu prajvara yorapi.
मृत्युप्रज्वारयोरपि.
When the living entity is in deep sleep, when he faints, when there is some great shock on account of severe loss at the time of death, or when the body temperature is very high, the movement of the life air is arrested. At that time, the living entity loses knowledge of identifying the body with the self. Foolish people deny the existence of the soul, but it is a fact that when we sleep, we forget the identity of the material body. And when we awake, we forget the identity of the subtle body. In other words, while sleeping, we forget the activities of the gross body, and when active in the gross body, we forget the activities of sleeping. Isn't it? In the daytime, we are so worried about certain things. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do this. This is mine, and I'm this. But at night, we completely forget it. Can't remember anything. When we are like completely dead to the workings of the gross body, and we are active in the subtle body. When we are sleeping, when the gross body is sleeping, the subtle body is active. And when we are awake, then we forget our dream. We don't hold on to it. We forget it. Actually, both states, sleeping and waking, are creations of the illusory energy. The living entity actually has no connection with either the activities of sleep or the activities of the so-called vacant state. When a man is in deep sleep or when he has fainted, he forgets his gross body. Similarly, under chloroform or some other anesthetic, the living entity forgets his gross body and does not feel pain or pleasure during a surgical operation. Similarly, when a man is suddenly shocked by some great loss, he forgets his identification with the gross body. At the time of death, when the temperature of the body rises to 107 degrees, the living entity falls into a coma and is unable to identify his gross body. In such cases, the life air that moves within the body is choked up, and the living entity forgets its identification with the gross body. Because of our ignorance of the spiritual body, of which we have no experience, we do not know the activities of the spiritual body. And in ignorance, we jump from one false platform to another. So Prabhupada is helping us understand, when we are undergoing some surgery, we are put under, the anesthetic. We can't remember. That time we're in such deep sleep, we don't remember at all that we are the body. That's why we are not able to feel the pain. Whatever the surgeon is doing, we are just in deep sleep. We've forgotten we are the body. So, and now what's happened is we have forgotten our activities of the spiritual body because of our ignorance. And then we are thinking, okay, I need to enjoy in this material body, or it will be nice to have this kind of body, or it will be nice to have that body. Look how they are enjoying. We create so many desires out of our mind. That's why it's called mental concoction. Because our mind is thinking, making us think, oh, you're not happy in this body. Okay, take another material body. Try to enjoy it that way, and then you will be happy. Then in that body also we think the same thing. Again, another body and another body. We act sometimes in relation to the gross body and sometimes in relation to the subtle body. If by Krishna's grace we act in our spiritual body, we can transcend both the gross and spiritual bodies. In other words, we can gradually train ourselves to act in terms of the spiritual body. So we are spirit souls. We have a spiritual body. Each of us have our own spiritual body. And Prabhupada is saying, we can train ourselves gradually to act as the soul, because we are the soul. Spiritual body means soul. As stated in the Nārada Pancharatra, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. Devotional service means engaging the spiritual body and spiritual senses in the service of the Lord. When we are engaged in such activities, the actions and reactions of the gross and subtle body cease. So, when we are thinking, I'm the body, we are creating more and more bodies for ourselves. We are acting in certain ways. It could be gross body or mental body, subtle body. We are just creating more reactions. But when we can act as spirit soul, it means engage in pure devotional service. Then there is no reaction. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate means engaging the senses in the service of master of senses. By the eyes, we can see the deity, can see the devotees, we can see the dham, we can see the books, read the books. With the ears, we hear the glories of the Lord, we hear His holy name, we hear the glories of the devotees, we hear the beautiful pastimes of the Lord, we hear about the beautiful relationship between the Lord and His devotees. By the mouth we're chanting, chant the Hare Krishna mantra, we chant from Bhagavad Gita, we glorify the devotees. Like that. That just means acting on engaging the spiritual body and spiritual senses. The activities of devotional service are spiritual. So that's acting on the platform of the soul. So we are encouraged to come to that platform to revive our real consciousness. Garbhe balye api apaukshalyad.
गर्भे बाल्ये अप्यपौक्ष-कल्यात्
Ekadasha vidham tada.
एकादशविधं तदा
Lingam na drishyate yona.
लिङ्गं न दृश्यते यून
Kovam chandramaso yatha.
पूर्वं चन्द्रमसो यथा.
When one is a youth, all the 10 senses and the mind are completely visible. However, in the mother's womb or in the boyhood state, the sense organs and the mind remain covered, just as the full moon is covered by the darkness of the dark moon night. When a living entity is within the womb, his gross body, the 10 sense organs, the mind are not fully developed. At such a time, the objects of the senses do not disturb him. In a dream, a young man may experience the presence of a young woman because at that time the senses are active. Because of undeveloped senses, a child or boy will not see a young woman in his dreams. The senses are active in youth even when one dreams, and although there may be no young woman present, the senses may act, and there may be a seminal discharge, nocturnal emission. The activities of the subtle and gross bodies depend on how developed conditions are. The example of the moon is very appropriate. On a dark moon night, the full shining moon is still present, but it appears not to be present due to condition. So, like sometimes the moon is visible to us, sometimes not visible to us. Similarly, the senses, although they are there, they may be developed, they may not be developed, depending on the situation. That's what we are trying to understand. Like when the child is in the womb, senses are there, mind is there, but it's not fully functioning under certain circumstances, not fully active under circumstances. Similarly, the senses of the living entity are there, but they only become active when the gross body and subtle body are developed. Unless the senses of the gross body are developed, they will not act on the subtle body. Similarly, Because of the absence of desires in the subtle body, there may be no development in the gross body. So what's the point to understand is that, like in a child, the senses are not fully developed, no? And so they are not, so the mind is not being active in that direction either. So similarly, because the mind does not have any of these material desires, there is no future bodies, gross bodies being created. So it needs a combination of both the gross body and subtle body. That's how our this material life is going on. So unless the senses of the gross body are developed, they will not act on the subtle body. So as we just said, that the child, he does not care about the young woman, because why? His senses are not developed. Only when he reaches a certain age, and then because the senses are developed, the gross body is developed, does his mind get agitated. So it's going hand in hand. So the mind, in the absence of desires in the subtle body, so when the subtle body has no more material desires, it's not going to create any more gross bodies for us. That's how we can get out of this material world. There is no future bodies for us to take up then. Arte hi avidyamanepi
अर्थेय विद्यमानेऽपि
samsritirna nivartate
संसृतिर्न निवर्तते
dhyayato vishayan asya
ध्यायतो विषयान् अस्य
swapne narthagamo yatha.
स्वप्नेनर्थागमो यथा.
When the living entity dreams, the sense objects are not actually present. However, because one has associated with the sense objects, they become manifest. Similarly, the living entity with undeveloped senses does not cease to exist materially, even though he may not be exactly in contact with the sense objects. It is sometimes said that because a child is innocent, he is completely pure. Actually, this is not the fact. The effects of fruitive activities reserved in the subtle body appear in three concurrent stages. One is called Vijja, the root. Another is called Kutastha, the desire. And another is called Phalonmukha, about to fructify. The manifest stage is called Prarabdha, already in action. So whatever we are suffering or enjoying right now, that is our Prarabdha karma. It's fructified already. In a conscious or unconscious state, the actions of the subtle or gross body may not be manifest, but such states cannot be called the liberated state. So the karma, it's in prarabdha, what right now we are experiencing, means already fructified. Then there is phalonmukha, about to fructify, just about to receive, what we are just about to receive. And then there are the desires which are stored as kuta, and those are in the heart. Those material desires. And bija, the root. This is how this karma, the different degrees of karma is stored in our heart. Different stages. So in conscious or unconscious state, the actions of subtle or gross bodies may not be manifest, but such states cannot be called the liberated state. A child may be innocent, but this does not mean that he is a liberated soul. Everything is held in reservation, and everything will become manifest in due course of time. So we say a child is innocent because as yet the desires have not become very, developed. Those bija, the root is there still. But because the body, the gross body is not yet developed, the child does not manifest those symptoms. So it will come about as the child grows about. Whatever is in the heart, will become manifest. The desires that are stored in the heart, the child will eventually, when the child becomes a man, he eventually will act on those desires. Because you see, it's coming from past life, right? So even when we are child, those desires are still there in our subtle body. They are stored there. So that's why Prabhupada is trying to explain. Doesn't mean that the child is liberated. It's just the time is not yet, the body is not yet developed for the desires to be manifest. Even in the absence of certain manifestations in the subtle body, the objects of sense enjoyment may act. The example has been given of a nocturnal emission, in which the physical senses act even when the physical objects are not manifest. So in the dream, what happens is the sense object is not there, but the senses are still acting. It's just a projection of the mind. The three modes of material nature may not be manifest in the subtle body, but the contamination of the three modes remain conserved. And in due course of time, it becomes manifest. Even if the reactions of the subtle and gross bodies are not manifest, one does not become free from the material condition. Therefore, it is wrong to say that a child is as good as a liberated soul. No, because everything is held in the heart, in the subtle body. And when the gross body develops, then the child will act on those desires. Well, he won't be a child anymore. He'll be called a young man. So this is for us to understand, that because we are carrying these desires of ours since many, many, many past births. Since many past births, then we take another body, then we are child, but those desires are there in our heart in the form of root, the bija, the kutta. Are there any questions or comments? So what we are trying to understand is these desires, the mind. Based on the mind, we are creating so many more and more desires, more and more desires. And we need to purify our consciousness so that we can stop creating more and more bodies for ourselves, so that we can eventually, gradually go back home, back to Godhead. So that the consciousness is purified. And the way to do that is we begin hearing from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. We chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. We worship the deity, offer prayers, act in Krishna consciousness. In this way, gradually, we go back home, back to Godhead. Did you want to add anything? Anyone? Well, then let's stop here for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in and joining in. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Hare